Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Western Canon Challenge, where we are reading the entirety of the Western literary canon out loud. Today we are continuing in the Pensées of Blaise Pascal, and this is Thoughts 71 through 99. '71. Too much and too little wine. Give him none, he cannot find truth. Give him too much, the same. '72. Man's disproportion. This is where our innate knowledge leads us. If it be not true, there is no truth in man. And if it be true, he finds therein great cause for humiliation, being compelled to abase himself in one way or another. And since he cannot exist without this knowledge, I wish that, before entering on deeper researches into nature, he would consider her both seriously and at leisure, that he would reflect upon himself also, and knowing what proportion there is, let man then contemplate the whole of nature in her full and grand majesty, and turn his vision from the low objects which surround him. Let him gaze on that brilliant light, set like an eternal lamp to illumine the universe. Let the earth appear to him a point in comparison with the vast circle described by the sun. And let him wonder that the fact that this vast circle is itself but a very fine point in comparison with that described by the stars in their revolution round the firmament. That if our view be arrested there, let our imagination pass beyond. It will sooner exhaust the power of conception than nature that of supplying material for conception. The whole visible world is only an imperceptible atom in the ample bosom of nature. No idea approaches it. We may enlarge our conceptions beyond all imaginable space. We only produce atoms in comparison with the reality of things. It is an infinite sphere, the center of which is everywhere, the circumference nowhere. In short, it is the greatest sensible mark of the almighty power of God, that imagination loses itself in that thought. Returning to himself, let man consider what he is in comparison with all existence. Let him regard himself as lost in this remote corner of nature, and from the little cell in which he finds himself lodged, I mean the universe, let him estimate at their true value the earth, kingdoms, cities, and himself. What is a man in the infinite? But to show him another prodigy equally astonishing, let him examine the most delicate things he knows. Let a mite be given him, with its minute body, and parts incomparably more minute, limbs with their joints, veins in the limbs, blood in the veins, humors in the blood, drops in the humors, vapors in the drops. Dividing these last things again, let him exhaust his powers of conception, and let the last object at which he can arrive be now that of our discourse. Perhaps he will think that here is the smallest point in nature. I will let him see therein a new abyss. I will paint for him not only the visible universe, but all that he can conceive of nature's immensity in the womb of his abridged atom. Let him see therein an infinity of universes, each of which has its firmament, its planets, its earth, in the same proportion as in the visible world. In each earth animals, and in the last mites, in which he will find again all that the first had, finding still in these others the same thing without end and without cessation. Let him lose himself in wonders as amazing in their littleness as the others in their vastness. For who will not be astounded at the fact that our body, which a little while ago was imperceptible in the universe, itself imperceptible in the bosom of the whole, is now a colossus, a world, or rather a whole, in respect of the nothingness which we cannot reach? He who regards himself in this light will be afraid of himself, and observing himself sustained in the body given him by nature between those two abysses of the infinite and nothing, will tremble at the sight of these marvels. And I think that as his curiosity changes into admiration, he will be more disposed to contemplate them in silence than to examine them with presumption. For in fact, what is man in nature? a nothing in comparison with the infinite, an all in comparison with the nothing, a mean between nothing and everything. Since he is infinitely removed from comprehending the extremes, the end of things and their beginning are hopelessly hidden from him in an impenetrable secret. He is equally incapable of seeing the nothing from which he was made, and the infinite in which he is swallowed up. What will he do then but perceive the appearance of the middle things, and an eternal despair of knowing either their beginning or their end? All things proceed from nothing, and are born towards the infinite. Who will follow these marvelous processes? The author of these wonders understands them. None other can do so. Through failure to contemplate these infinities, men have rashly rushed into the examination of nature as though they bore some proportion to her. It is strange that they have wished to understand the beginnings of things, and thence to arrive at the knowledge of the whole with a presumption as infinite as their object. For surely this design cannot be formed without presumption, or without a capacity infinite like nature. If we are well informed, we understand that as nature has graven her image and that of her author on all things, they almost all partake in her double infinity. Thus we see that all the sciences are infinite in the extent of their researches. For who doubts that geometry, for instance, has an infinite infinity of problems to solve? They are also infinite in the multitude and fineness of their premises, for it is clear that those which are put forward as ultimate are not self-supporting, but are based on others, which, again, having others for their support, do not permit of finality. But we represent some as ultimate for reason, in the same way as in regard to material objects we call that an indivisible point beyond which our senses can no longer perceive anything, although by its nature it is infinitely divisible. Of these two infinites of science, that of greatness is the most palpable, and hence a few persons have pretended to know all things. I will speak of the whole, says Democritus. But the infinitely little is the least obvious. Philosophers have much oftener claimed to have reached it, and it is here they have all stumbled. This first has given rise to such common titles as First Principles, Principles of Philosophy, and the like, as ostentatious in fact, though not in appearance, as that one which blinds us of all that is known. We naturally believe ourselves far more capable of reaching the center of things than of embracing their circumference. The visible extent of the world visibly exceeds us. But as we exceed little things, we think ourselves more capable of knowing them. And yet we need no less capacity for attaining the nothing than the all. Infinite capacity is required for both. And it seems to me that whoever shall have understood the ultimate principles of being might also attain to the knowledge of the infinite. The one depends on the other, and one leads to the other. These extremes meet and reunite by force of distance, and find each other in God, and in God alone. Let us then take our compass. We are something, and we are not everything. The nature of our existence hides from us the knowledge of first beginnings, which are born of the nothing, and the littleness of our being conceals from us the sight of the infinite. Our intellect holds the same position in the world of thought as our body occupies in the expanse of nature. Limited as we are in every way, this state which holds the mean between two extremes is present in all our impotence. Our senses perceive no extreme. Too much sound deafens us. Too much light dazzles us. Too great distance or proximity hinders our view. Too great length and too great brevity of discourse tends to obscurity. Too much truth is paralyzing. I know some who cannot understand that to take four from nothing leaves nothing. First principles are too self-evident for us. Too much pleasure disagrees with us. Too many concords are annoying in music. Too many benefits irritate us. We wish to have the wherewithal to overpay our debts. Benefits are acceptable, while the receiver thinks he may return them. But once exceeding that, hatred is given instead of thanks. Tacitus. We feel neither extreme heat nor extreme cold. Excessive qualities are prejudicial to us and not perceptible by the senses. We do not feel but suffer them. Extreme youth and extreme age hinder the mind, as also too much and too little education. In short, extremes are for us as though they were not, and we are not within their notice. They escape us, or we them. This is our true state. This is what makes us incapable of certain knowledge and of absolute ignorance. We sail within a vast sphere, ever drifting in uncertainty, driven from end to end. When we think to attach ourselves to any point and to fasten to it, it wavers and leaves us. And if we follow it, it eludes our grasp, slips past us, and vanishes forever. Nothing stays for us. This is our natural condition, and yet most contrary to our inclination. We burn with desire to find solid ground and an ultimate sure foundation whereon to build a tower reaching to the infinite, but our whole groundwork cracks, and the earth opens to the abysses. Let us therefore not look for certainty and stability. Our reason is always deceived by fickle shadows. Nothing can fix the finite between the two infinites, which both enclose and fly from it. If this be well understood, I think that we shall remain at rest, each in the state wherein nature has placed him. As this sphere which has fallen to us as our lot is always distant from either extreme, what matters it that man should have a little more knowledge of the universe? If he has it, he but gets a little higher. Is he not always infinitely removed from the end? And is not the duration of our life equally removed from eternity, even if it lasts 10 years longer? In comparison with these infinites, all finites are equal, and I see no reason for fixing our imagination on one more than another. The only comparison which we make of ourselves to the finite is painful to us. If man made himself the first object of study, he would see how incapable he is of going further. How can a part know the whole? But he may perhaps aspire to know at least the parts to which he bears some proportion. But the parts of the world are all so related and linked to one another that I believe it impossible to know one without the other, and without the whole. Man, for instance, is related to all he knows. He needs a place wherein to abide, time through which to live, motion in order to live, elements to compose him, warmth and food to nourish him, air to breathe. He sees light, he feels bodies. In short, he is in a dependent alliance with everything. To know man, then, it is necessary to know how it happens that he needs air to live. And to know the air, we must know how it is thus related to the life of man, etc. Flame cannot exist without air. Therefore, to understand the one, we must understand the other. Since everything then is cause and effect, dependent and supporting, mediate and immediate, and all is held together by a natural, though imperceptible chain, which binds together things most distant and most different, I hold it equally impossible to know the parts without knowing the whole, and to know the whole without knowing the parts in detail. The eternity of things in itself or in God must also astonish our brief duration. The fixed and constant immobility of nature in comparison with the continual change which goes on within us must have the same effect. And what completes our incapability of knowing things is the fact that they are simple, and that we are composed of two opposite natures, different in kind, soul and body. For it is impossible that our rational part should be other than spiritual, and if anyone maintained that we are simply corporeal, this would far more exclude us from the knowledge of things, there being nothing so inconceivable as to say that matter knows itself. It is impossible to imagine how it should know itself. So if we are simply material, we can know nothing at all. And if we are composed of mind and matter, we cannot know perfectly things which are simple, whether spiritual or corporeal. Hence it comes that almost all philosophers have confused ideas of things, and speak of material things in spiritual terms, and of spiritual things in material terms. for they say boldly that bodies have a tendency to fall, that they seek after their center, that they fly from destruction, that they fear the void, that they have inclinations, sympathies, antipathies, all of which attributes pertain only to mind. And in speaking of minds, they consider them as any place, and attribute to them movement from one place to another, and these are qualities which belong only to bodies. Instead of receiving the ideas of these things in their purity, we color them with our own qualities, and stamp with our composite being all the simple things which we contemplate. Who would not think, seeing us compose all things of mind and body, but that this mixture would be quite intelligible to us? Yet it is the very thing that we least understand. Man is to himself the most wonderful object in nature, for he cannot conceive what the body is, still less what the mind is, and least of all how a body should be united to a mind. This is the consummation of his difficulties, and yet it is his very being. The manner in which the spirit is united to the body cannot be understood by man, and yet it is man. St. Augustine, The City of God. Finally, to complete the proof of our weakness, I shall conclude with these two considerations. 73. But perhaps this subject goes beyond the capacity of reason. Let us therefore examine her solutions to problems within her powers. If there be anything to which her own interest must have made her apply herself most seriously, it is the inquiry into her own sovereign good. Let us see then wherein these strong and clear-sighted souls have placed it, and whether they agree. One says that the sovereign good consists in virtue, another in pleasure, another in the knowledge of nature, another in truth. Happy the man who, studying nature's laws through known effects, can trace their cause. Dryden's translation of a quote from Virgil. Another in total ignorance, another in indolence, others in disregarding appearances, another in wondering at nothing. Marvel at nothing. That is perhaps the one and only thing, Numisius, that can make a man happy and keep him so. Horace, The Epistles. And the true skeptics in their indifference, doubt, and perpetual suspense, and others wiser, think to find a better definition. We are all well satisfied. To transpose after the laws to the following title. We must see if this fine philosophy has gained nothing certain from so long and so intense study. Perhaps at least the soul will know itself. Let us hear the rulers of the world on this subject. What have they thought of her substance? Have they been more fortunate in locating her? What have they found out about her origin, duration, and departure? Is then the soul too noble a subject for their feeble lights? Let us then abase her to matter, and see if she knows whereof is made the very body which she animates, and those others which she contemplates and moves at her will. What have those great dogmatists who are ignorant of nothing known of this matter? These sentences. This would doubtless suffice if reason were reasonable. She is reasonable enough to admit that she has been unable to find anything durable, but she does not yet despair of reaching it. She is as ardent as ever in this search, and is confident she has within her the necessary powers for this conquest. We must therefore conclude, and after having examined her powers and their effects, observe them in themselves, and see if she has a nature and grasp capable of laying hold of the truth. 74. A letter on the foolishness of human knowledge and philosophy. This letter before diversion. Felix qui potuit, nihil admirari. 280 kinds of sovereign good in Montaigne. 75. Part 1, 1, 2, C1, Section 4. Probability. It will not be difficult to put the case a stage lower and make it appear ridiculous. To begin at the very beginning, what is more absurd than to say that lifeless bodies have passions, fears, hatreds, that insensible bodies, lifeless and incapable of life, have passions which presuppose at least a sensitive soul to feel them, nay more, that the object of their dread is the void? What is there in the void that could make them afraid? Nothing is more shallow and ridiculous. This is not all. It is said that they have in themselves a source of movement to shun the void. Have they arms, legs, muscles, nerves? 76. To write against those who made too profound a study of science. Descartes. 77. I cannot forgive Descartes. In all his philosophy he would have been quite willing to dispense with God. But he had to make him give a fillip to set the world in motion. Beyond this he has no further need of God. 78. Descartes useless and uncertain. 79. Descartes, we must say summarily, this is made by figure and motion, for it is true, but to say what these are, and to compose the machine is ridiculous, for it is useless, uncertain, and painful. And were it true, we do not think all philosophy is worth 1 hour of pain. 80. How come it that a cripple does not offend us, but that a fool does? Because a cripple recognizes that we walk straight, whereas a fool declares that it is we who are silly. If it were not so, we should feel pity and not anger. Epictetus asks still more strongly, why are we not angry if we are told that we have a headache? And why are we angry if we are told that we reason badly or choose wrongly? The reason is that we are quite certain that we have not a headache or are not lame, but we are not so sure that we make a true choice. So having assurance only because we see with our whole sight, it puts us into suspense and surprise when another with his whole sight sees the opposite, and still more so when 1,000 others deride our choice, for we must prefer our own lights to those of so many others, and that is bold and difficult. There is never this contradiction in the feelings towards a cripple. 81. It is natural for the mind to believe, and for the will to love, so that for want of true objects they must attach themselves to false. 82. Imagination. It is that deceitful part in man, that mistress of error and falsity, the more deceptive that she is not always so. For she would be an infallible rule of truth if she were an infallible rule of falsehood. But being most generally false, she gives no sign of her nature, impressing the same character on the true and the false. I do not speak of fools, I speak of the wisest men, and it is among them that the imagination has the great gift of persuasion. Reason protests in vain. It cannot set a true value on things. This arrogant power, the enemy of reason who likes to rule and dominate it, has established in man a second nature to show how all-powerful she is. She makes men happy and sad, healthy and sick, rich and poor. She compels reason to believe, doubt, and deny. She blunts the senses or quickens them. She has fools and sages. And nothing vexes us more than to see that she fills her devotees with a satisfaction far more full and entire than does reason. Those who have a lively imagination are a great deal more pleased with themselves than the wise can reasonably be. They look down upon men with haughtiness. They argue with boldness and confidence, others with fear and diffidence. And this gaiety of countenance often gives them the advantage in the opinion of the hearers. Such favor have the imaginary wise in the eyes of judges of like nature. Imagination cannot make fools wise, but she can make them happy, to the envy of reason which can only make its friends miserable. The one covers them with glory, the other with shame. What but this faculty of imagination dispenses reputation, awards, respect, and veneration to persons, works, laws, and the great? How insufficient are all the riches of the earth without her consent? Would you not say that this magistrate, whose venerable age commands the respect of a whole people, is governed by pure and lofty reason, and that he judges causes according to their true nature, without considering those mere trifles which only affect the imagination of the weak? See him go to sermon, full of devout zeal, strengthening his reason with the ardor of his love. He is ready to listen with the exemplary respect. Let the preacher appear, and let nature have given him a hoarse voice, or a comical cast of countenance, or let his barber have given him a bad shave, or let by chance his dress be more dirty than usual. Then, however great the truth he announces, I wager our senator loses his gravity. If the greatest philosopher in the world find himself upon plank wider than actually necessary, but hanging over a precipice, his imagination will prevail, though his reason convince him of his safety. Many cannot bear the thought without a cold sweat. I will not state all its effects. Everyone knows that the sight of cats or rats, the crushing of a coal, etc., may unhinge the reason. The tone of voice affects the wisest, and changes the force of a discourse or a poem. Love or hate alters the aspect of justice. How much greater confidence has an advocate, retained with a large fee, in the justice of his cause? How much better does his bold manner make his case appear to the judges, deceived as they are by appearances? How ludicrous is reason, blown with a breath in every direction! I should have to enumerate almost every action of men who scarce waver save under her assaults. For reason has been obliged to yield, and the wisest reason takes as her own principles those which the imagination of man has everywhere rashly introduced. He who would follow reason only would be deemed foolish by the generality of men. We must judge by the opinion of the majority of mankind. Because it has pleased them, we must work all day, for pleasures seem to be imaginary. And after sleep has refreshed our tired reason, we must forthwith start up and rush after phantoms, and suffer the impressions of this mistress of the world. This is one of the sources of error, but it is not the only one. Our magistrates have known well this mystery. Their red robes, the ermine in which they wrap themselves like furry cats, the courts in which they administer justice, the fleur-de-lis, and all such august apparel were necessary. If the physicians had not their cassocks and their mules, if the doctors had not their square caps and their robes 4 times too wide, they would never have duped the world, which cannot resist so original an appearance. If magistrates had true justice, and if physicians had the true art of healing, they would have no occasion for square caps. The majesty of these sciences would of itself be venerable enough. But having only imaginary knowledge, they must employ those silly tools that strike the imagination with which they have to deal, and thereby, in fact, they inspire respect. Soldiers alone are not disguised in this manner, because indeed their part is the most essential. They establish themselves by force, the others by show. Therefore our kings seek out no disguises. They do not mask themselves in extraordinary costumes to appear such, but they are accompanied by guards and halberdiers, those armed and red-faced puppets who have hands and power for them alone, those trumpets and drums which go before them, and those legions round about them, make the stoutest tremble. They have not dress only, they have might. A very refined reason is required to regard as an ordinary man the Grand Turk and his superb seraglio, surrounded by 40,000 janissaries. We cannot even see an advocate in his robe and with his cap on his head without a favorable opinion of his ability. The imagination disposes of everything. It makes beauty, justice, and happiness, which is everything in the world. I should much like to see an Italian work of which I only know the title, which alone is worth many books. Opinion is the queen of the world. I approve of the book without knowing it, save the evil in it, if any. These are pretty much the effects of that deceptive faculty which seems to have been expressly given us to lead us into necessary error. We have, however, many other sources of error. Not only are old impressions capable of misleading us, the charms of novelty have the same power. Hence arise all the disputes of men, who taunt each other either with following the false impressions of childhood, or with running rashly after the new. Who keeps the Jew mean? Let him appear and prove it. There is no principle, however natural to us from infancy, which may not be made to pass for a false impression, either of education or of sense. Because, say some, you have believed from childhood that a box was empty when you saw nothing in it, you have believed in the possibility of a vacuum. This is an illusion of your senses, strengthened by custom which science must correct. Because, say others, you have been taught at school that there is no vacuum, you have perverted your common sense, which clearly comprehended it, and you must correct this by returning to your first state. Which has deceived you, your senses or your education? We have another source of error and diseases. They spoil the judgment and the senses, and if the more serious produce a sensible change, I do not doubt that slighter ills produce a proportionate impression. Our own interest is again a marvelous instrument for nicely putting out our eyes. The justest man in the world is not allowed to be judge in his own cause. I know someone who, in order not to fall into this self-love, have been perfectly unjust out of opposition. The sure way of losing a just cause has been to get it recommended to these men by their near relatives. Justice and truth are two such subtle points that our tools are too blunt to touch them accurately. If they reach the point, they either crush it or lean all around, more on the false than on the true. Man is so happily formed that he has no, and here there's a blank, good of the true, and several excellent of the false. Let us now see how much, here is another blank. But the most powerful cause of error is the war existing between the senses and reason. 83. We must thus begin the chapter on the deceptive powers. Man is only a subject full of error, natural and ineffaceable without grace. Nothing shows him the truth. Everything deceives him. These two sources of truth, reason and the senses, besides being both wanting in sincerity, deceive each other in turn. The senses mislead the reason with false appearances, and receive from reason in their turn the same trickery which they apply to her. Reason has her revenge. The passions of the soul trouble the senses and make false impressions upon them. They rival each other in falsehood and deception. But besides those errors which arise accidentally and through lack of intelligence with these heterogeneous faculties. 84. The imagination enlarges little objects so as to fill our souls with a fantastic estimate, and, with rash insolence, it belittles the great to its own measure, as when talking of God. 85. Things which have most hold on us, as the concealment of our few possessions, are often a mere nothing. It is a nothing which our imagination magnifies into a mountain. Another turn of the imagination would make us discover this without difficulty. 86. My fancy makes me hate a croaker, and one who pants when eating. Fancy has great weight. Shall we profit by it? Shall we yield to this weight because it is natural? No, but by resisting it. ... 87. Truly he, with a great effort, will shortly say a mighty trifle. Terence. There is nothing certain, and that there is nothing more proud or more wretched than man. Pliny the Younger. 88. Children who are frightened at the face they have blackened are but children. But how shall one who was so weak in his childhood become really strong when he grows older? We only change our fancies. All that is made perfect by progress perishes also by progress. All that has been weak can never become absolutely strong. We say in vain, "He has grown, he has changed." He is also the same. Custom is our nature. He who is accustomed to the faith believes in it, can no longer fear hell, and believes in nothing else. He who is accustomed to believe that the king is terrible, etc. Who doubts then that our soul, being accustomed to see number, space, motion, believes that and nothing else? 90. What he often sees he does not admire, though he be ignorant how it comes to pass. When a thing happens he never saw before, he thinks that it is a portent. Cicero. 91. Spongia solis. When we see the same effect always recur, we infer a natural necessity in it, as that there will be a tomorrow, etc. But nature often deceives us, and does not subject herself to her own rules. 92. What are our natural principles, but principles of custom? In children, they are those which they have received from the habits of their fathers, as hunting and animals. A different custom will cause different natural principles. This is seen in experience, and if there are some natural principles ineradicable by custom, there are also some customs opposed to nature, ineradicable by nature, or by a second custom. This depends on disposition. 93. Parents fear lest the natural love of their children may fade away. What kind of nature is that which is subject to decay? Custom is a second nature which destroys the former. But what is nature? For is custom not natural? I am much afraid that nature is itself only a first custom, as custom is a second nature. 94. The nature of man is wholly natural, omne animal. There is nothing he may not make natural. There is nothing natural he may not lose. 95. Memory, joy are intuitions, and even mathematical propositions become intuitions, for education produces natural intuitions, and natural intuitions are erased by education. 96. When we are accustomed to use bad reasons for proving natural effects, we are not willing to receive good reasons when they are discovered. An example may be given from the circulation of the blood as a reason why the vein swells below the ligature. 97. The most important affair in life is the choice of a calling. Chance decides it. Custom makes men masons, soldiers, slaters. He is a good slater, says one, and speaking of soldiers, remarks, "They are perfect fools." But others affirm, "There is nothing great but war, and rest of men are good for nothing." We choose our callings according as we hear this or that praised or despised in our childhood, for we naturally love truth and hate folly. These words move us. The only error is in their application. So great is the force of custom that out of those whom nature has only made men are created all conditions of men. For some districts are full of masons, others of soldiers, etc. Certainly nature is not so uniform. It is custom, then, which does this, for it constrains nature. But sometimes nature gains the ascendancy and preserves man's instinct, in spite of all custom, good or bad. 98. Bias leading to error. It is a deplorable thing to see all men deliberating on means alone, and not on the end. Each thinks how he will acquit himself in his condition, but as for the choice of condition, or of country, chance gives them to us. It is a pitiable thing to see so many Turks, heretics, and infidels follow the way of their fathers, for the sole reason that each has been imbued with the prejudice that it is the best, and that fixes for each man his condition of locksmith, soldier, etc. Hence, savages care nothing for providence. 99. There is an universal and essential difference between the actions of the will and all other actions. The will is one of the chief factors in belief, not that it creates belief, but because things are true or false according to the aspect in which we look at them. The will, which prefers one aspect to another, turns away the mind from considering the qualities of all that it does not like to see. And thus the mind, moving in accord with the will, stops to consider the aspect which it likes, and so judges by what it sees. This is the end of thoughts 71 through 99 of the Pensées of Blaise Pascal. Thank you for listening.